the other benefit is also that in terms of legislation, it's a very gray area still as to where you can and can't run short-term rentals. And I guess the one thing people can't argue is that you can run it in what used to be a hotel. So
How interesting. You've crossed over to the dark side, Naim. You're moving over to the hoteliers. Well, they're trying to shut us down. You're joining them.
well,
Or
I
you're
think we've
actually
shut
taking.
them. I think we shut them down. So now's the time to go and reap the benefits of that.
This is episode number 93 of the Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast.
Are you an investor that's looking to have your home professionally managed? Go to cohostit.com for more information.
Welcome back to Short-Term Rental Success Stories. I'm your host, Julian Sage. This is a show where I talk to hosts about their journeys in starting and growing their short-term rental business. My goal is that you'll be able to walk away with practical information that'll help you become a better host and learn how to scale your business. Like any exceptional host, we all strive for 5-star reviews, so please go on over to iTunes and let us know what you enjoy, as it really helps support the show. If you haven't done so already, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation, to connect with the community. Hey, welcome back, hosts. Today I have the special honor of speaking with Na'ím Paymán, the founder of Keezark, a short-term rental company that has around 400 units. They started in 2015. Now they have around 400 units, a mix of those being managed, master leased, and owned. Naim is also the founder of Zeevou, a short-term rental property management software, or PMS, as well as a channel manager. In this episode, Naim shares his journey of basically just trying to short-term rent to survive, but how he was actually able to turn that into a profitable and scalable business, how he scaled from 0 to over 400 properties in just a few short years, as well as why he created Zeevou, as well as the strategic moves that he's making right now in the hotel space. So some really exciting conversations. Definitely gets my gears turning in this episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you guys are enjoying this, please subscribe. If you haven't done so already, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, smash this like button. Let us know that you are enjoying this comment, and go ahead and comment down below. What are some of the things that you learned in this episode? What are the things that you've taken away? Would love to be able to read and respond to your comments down below. Of course, if you like my show notes for this episode, as well as any of the resources that we talk about in this show, go to shorttermsage.com/STR93. Or if you like my show notes sent directly to your inbox every week, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Hey, welcome back, Host Nation, to another episode of Short-Term Rental Success Stories. In this episode, I have the special honor of speaking with Na'ím Paymán. Naim, would you please introduce yourself to the Host Nation, let them know who you are, and what inspired you to get into short-term rentals?
Hi, thanks for having me on this show. So my name is Naim. I started off in property management for vacation rentals, and then from there went into also managing guest houses and hotels. So we do that through Keezark, our property management company. And as I was expanding that business, we sort of got stuck in terms of remote management of properties. So that's how Zeevou was born, which is a property management system that we now use. And the inspiration behind all of this was food, but that's a story for another time, perhaps.
Awesome. Well, definitely, I want to jump into that story. And you got a lot on your plate right now, Naim. You got Keezark, your property management company. You got around 400 properties at the time. Zeevou, your PMS and channel manager, which just recently launched this year. And then you also got an investment fund that focuses on the hospitality industry as well. So I want to be able to talk about some of those. But starting off with, you're hungry, so you decide to get into short-term rentals. Like, how does that, why not get a job or, go apply somewhere? Like, why start a short-term rental company?
Perhaps it was more so that I sought delicious food, and I was at university, and the food that we were being given was pretty awful, and we didn't have cooking facilities. So maybe it's more accurate to say it was the lack of cooking facilities rather than food itself. But that basically made me try and leave college accommodation, and I managed to get some investors to purchase a flat to rent out one of the rooms and stay in the other one in. And it worked out cheaper for me that way than paying college for the room. And as a bonus, I'd have a kitchen to cook in. The college wouldn't let me move once the transaction had completed, so then there was a flat that had to be filled. So filling that flat in the most profitable manner is how the property management company started.
So this came out of you wanting to get a kitchen, and then you had to fill the space, and then you just saw that there was some profit there, and you decided to scale that?
Yeah, right. So I actually, for about a year after that, I had a friend who was setting up a lettings agency. So I helped her do that, and she took over this flat and one other flat. And then sort of 6 months later, she left the country, and I took over those two flats and managed to find a couple more owners, or actually a couple more owners found me. It was sort of early days for Airbnb in the UK. So I just put a sentence on my profile saying, if anyone wants their property management, let me know. And had set up a website for it. And so managed to get sort of 5-6 properties under management over the summer break between my studies. Hired someone to run the business, went back and finished my last year. And then once I was done with the studies, that's when I started working on it full time. And then we grew fairly rapidly. So within 6 months, we went to something like 50, 60 units. And that's when things started becoming slightly messy. And I decided to put a pause on the growth until we had adequate software in place.
So you were targeting flats that were next to like colleges or college campuses, and you'd furnish them and provide like temporary student housing?
No. So we put them on Airbnb, Booking.com, and so on. So we started off in Cambridge, which is obviously a university town, but we were not really renting to students. So it was either people who were there on business or tourists or I don't know, people moving houses, things like that. And then after the first year, I think I also set up in Oxford. And then further down the line, we started expanding, and now we operate across 15, 20 cities, I think, across the UK.
This started off as kind of like a master lease from what it sounds like, but then it turned into you actually reaching out to property owners and then offering to furnish them, or what was kind of the structure that you had?
So I started off managing 4 people, and then I wasn't aware of the whole arbitrage world or anything like that at the point. And then 1 year down the line, when I finished my studies, I happened to meet someone who had actually spent £5,000 or something on a business plan with a large accountancy firm to set up a service apartment business, and had purchased 6 apartments with some acquaintances of his in a good location in Cambridge, in a new build. So I tried to see if we could take those on somehow, but he wasn't really interested in management. So I offered him sort of fixed monthly income management that he just paid me a salary basically instead of hiring someone. He wasn't interested in that either. And then a couple of weeks later, he called back and said, you know what, take the flats and just pay me X per month, which was slightly more than market rate. And that's how I got into master lease, as you call it, or arbitrage, or rent-to-rent, as they call it in the UK. And then I found out that there were a lot of people who were, providing mentorships and training and telling people how to do all of this. So yeah, there we were furnishing and subletting basically.
Awesome. So what did you find the most challenging part when you got started into this business?
The most challenging part, right at the beginning, I don't really recall if there was anything that was particular. I guess being small scale, the hardest thing was that every issue that happened, you found out about and you had to deal with, or you had to sort of oversee what was being decided and what was being done, even if I had someone else who was working on it full time. And now in hindsight, I can see that with scale, that the decision-making stress around things that go wrong is a lot more spread out across people in the team. So I guess that challenge has sort of disappeared. I mean, I guess it was more tiring than challenging because it was just something you had to work your way through till you grew out of it.
It sounds like pretty early on you decided to start reaching out to different markets as opposed to focusing on one particular market, or were they all relatively close to each other?
No, Cambridge and Oxford are around 2 hours drive from each other. But I'd done my high school, my A-levels, just outside of Oxford, and I had some contacts there who owned a couple of properties. So it just sort of came up in conversation, and it grew from there, really. Yeah. And then once those were there, then you just happened to find things in other places. And it was fairly difficult to expand within the one location. So cities in the UK are not probably as large as in the US. Certain cities could be. So there was a limited market and it was difficult to find more properties. So we just went to where the properties were.
And how are you finding these landlords that were looking to, furnish their properties and list them online?
So on the master lease option or as a management?
For management.
For management, it's been mostly the owners finding us rather than us finding the owners. In the very early days, I tried to find a couple by going on Gumtree, which is a bit something like Craigslist, and actually calling people up and seeing whether they'd be open to trying it out. Got I think 2 properties like that. But yeah, it's not necessarily easy finding management clients unless they're approaching you in the first place. We found a couple through Facebook groups more recently. But now with the investment fund, we've really stopped looking proactively for that because the income is also, the margins are very slim. And there's a lot of competition now in the management field, and there's a lot of churn in the properties, people trying it out, not getting what they thought they might get, moving on. So that's why we've decided to actually try and go into ownership through the fund.
So you grew Keezark relatively quickly in the beginning. You grew to around 50 properties. At around that 50 property mark, what were some of the challenges that you saw at that point?
So we were having challenges with cleans being missed, with security deposit handling. So having to go and manually have someone on site basically check the person in and get the card into the card machine and pre-authorize the funds, and then make sure that the funds were released after the stay, that they were not released before any damages were reported. But also that they were not released too late and that we didn't lose the slips. And once it got to 50, 60 properties and we had something like 10 staff, it was a bit of hearsay of who did what, and it was difficult to keep logs of things. We had dozens of spreadsheets. And then there was human error and people not logging things correctly, and inefficiencies, basically. I think cleaning and deposits were 2 of the main issues.
And was this just because of lack of systems, or just because you'd never started and built something like this? What do you see as being the biggest contributors to some of the disorganization?
I think lack of systems. I'd have the same issues now if we didn't have the system that helped us manage it all. It was basically all sort of the lack of centralized system for logging and managing and streamlining processes was the issue. So no matter how much we tried with, Google Forms and tried and trained people to get them to fill them, it just wasn't done because it was sort of all over the place. Whereas having it all in one place just means it's a lot easier to manage and also to oversee things. So even maintenance, logging and tracking and ensuring that it's been resolved.
And were there no PMSs or task management solutions at the time that could help you with those issues?
There were loads that told us that they could help us, and we tried out 6 or 7 of them. But we kept being disappointed, unfortunately.
I don't want you to name out any names, but what are some of the things that you see in the PMS task management world that there maybe even today is still a lack of functionality?
I think from what we use, one of the main issues was the fact that we were not able to find a system that was built for operators who operated out of more than one location, but had a mixture of single units and multi-units. So, there was lots of providers of hotel software who are obviously for a single location and lots of units. And then you have the sort of Airbnb piggyback style architecture of software where you have a unit here, a unit there, and a unit in another place. But if you take a block of flats in one place and you've got, say, 10 units and you've got 3 1-bedrooms and 7 2-bedrooms, and you want to group them, that's when the issues started with finding suitable software. And then the other issue is once we started going to more than one city, finding the software that actually allowed you to centrally manage and have a website that went with it, with a live booking system, and then finding a provider who actually had a good enough website that would allow you to work on getting direct bookings. Things, there just wasn't a solution that did everything that we needed to do. And in terms of task management, most of the property management systems out there don't really have task management system built in. Not in the hospitality sector at least, and that can meet everything else that we need.
And for the listeners that maybe aren't familiar with we're talking about PMS, channel manager, task management, can you kind of break down what these different terms are and how you've kind of built your company around it?
Sure. There's basically different pieces of software that hospitality businesses would use to manage their day-to-day tasks. So if we really want to break it down as much as possible, I guess the way that it started off from my limited knowledge is used to have in hotels sort of a central reservation system that basically just did the booking management, basically a calendar. And then that linked up with a channel manager, and the channel manager basically pulled the rates and availability from the central reservation system, distributed it to agents or to different websites, say to Booking.com and Expedia and so on after the year 2000, when the online travel aggregators started coming into play. And then on the other side, you had the property management system, which often was linked with this central reservation system, which allowed you to do some sort of task management. By task management, would probably mean, a cleaner being able to log in and see a list of the cleans, or various reporting tools, so being able to see how much you sold in a given month, or for the more hotel-like softwares, cash in hand management and things like that. The more modern versions have started to try and bring a lot of these systems together. And so now there are some, like ourselves, that try and combine all of it in one. But in a lot of the cases, what we found was that we actually never ended up trying an all-in-one system because they didn't have enough features. So they sort of had bits and bobs, but not enough to make it work. So we always stuck to having a separate PMS and a separate channel manager. The problem was that the PMSs weren't powerful enough as PMSs, and the channel managers that were claimed to be very powerful as channel managers in terms of even creating automated listings on various sites didn't have a good enough integration with the PMS and had a lot of bugs. And didn't work with that multi-unit setup that I was talking about earlier. So all in all, we weren't able to find a combination of all of those different parts that worked well enough.
And so after you scaled up to around 50 properties, you decided like, hey, I just got to create the all-in-one solution that, fits your needs.
Well, by the time I was sort of making enough money to be fairly comfortable, and I didn't feel that I needed, for me, time was more precious than the money and expanding more. So that's when I sort of decided that I wanted to reprioritize things and to wait with the expansion until we had systems that would allow us to do it without creating a big mess and having to sort out firefight basically all the time. So to start with, the system that we ended up using is a PMS, and we tried like 3 different channel managers linked to it. We tried building sort of bolt-ons to it. So we started off by by building a cleaning module to link with an API to them, but their API wasn't even working. So it kept breaking, and the data that they were passing us was problematic. And in the end, they also had a very long, this was something else that I really didn't like, was these tie-in contracts, where you're tied in for 1 or 2 years and you have to give 180 days notice. And so the year before, we'd missed the 180 days notice cutoff. This time I'd marked it in the calendar, and then I just spoke to the developers. By that point, I think we had 2 or 3 developers, and I spoke to the CTO and I said, look, I hadn't actually decided whether we wanted to sell the system to others. I just knew that I was going to dominate the world by building the perfect system and running our business on it. But I said, look, we've got 6 months to go, and I'm really fed up with these guys. I'd like to hand a notice. Can we actually build the core of the system within 6 months rather than just a cleaning system so I can get rid of them? And the answer was yes. Unfortunately, it didn't quite. We basically just about got there, but we ended up having a lot of bugs in the beginning with double bookings and things not working the way they should be working. But we went through a painful month or so, but we managed to sort of get it done. And I think it was a good decision, and I'm very happy that we did it.
Do you mind sharing some numbers to kind of help people conceptualize? Because I mean, you have around 50 properties. How big was your team, and what type of numbers were you able to pull in? After all of your expenses.
So at the time, we had 1 property manager, and 2 people were helping out with day-to-day communications with guests and so on. And managing listings. And then I tried to set up the second city, and then I needed someone in the other city as well to do the check-ins and so on. So I ended up trying to set up a rota from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. with staff manning all those hours and also doing check-ins. which was very expensive because I had to pay UK salaries for replying to communications, which we now do abroad, for example. And then we had I'd hired a PA who ended up turning into a housekeeping manager because we fired the cleaning company that we were using, and hired around 10 cleaners or so. And then we had, I think, 3 other part-timers who did check-ins, so who went to collect the security deposits and give the keys and so on. And as we went along, I basically also tried to see how we could minimize those costs and automate most of that through the software. I think at the time we were making a profit on average of maybe 10,000 a month or something like that, £10,000 a month after all costs.
And that's off of 50 properties.
That was
around
off 50 to 60 units. Yeah, I think mid 50s.
Okay. So and how much were you charging for your management percentage?
So on the management, we're charging 20 to 25%, but we're charging it after deduction of the fees that agents charged. But we were also doing arbitrage on a lot of the units by that point. So around 80% was master leases, as you mentioned.
Got it.
And so in the winter with master leases, we would actually lose money. And in the summer, we would make a lot of money. So it's just, and that's why I was trying to think what would sort of the annual average have been on what we actually made.
So how much would you say that you were able to make for like a management client versus one of your rent-to-rents or master leases?
Difficult to say. To start with, the managed clients were mostly 2, 3, or 4 bedroom houses or flats. So the nightly rates were actually higher. I think we were making on average around £700 a month, maybe, for each one. So we were selling sort of £3,500, £4,000. But that was pre-salaries, right? So that was just income into sort of the company profit. From the rent-to-rent ones, really tough to say. Some units did really well. Like in the summer, we would make up to £1,500 or £2,000 profit from a single unit. But then in the winter, there were units that we lost or only just about broke even on. So maybe we lost like a couple of hundred a unit in the winter months.
Now, at this point, you're building up this business. You've got this team. You're figuring out how to be able to operate. What did you decide to keep on focusing on scaling Keezark? Because you went from 50 and now you're up to around 400. But now you've also kind of shifted your focus towards your technology, your software, and now you're also looking into the investment fund. So I kind of want to see that progression. Like, was it all focused on the management up until a certain point, and at which point did that kind of shift?
Yeah, so I think when we started using Zeevou for ourselves, which was about 2 years ago, I also took sort of a year of a sabbatical in between for personal reasons. So I didn't really work in that year that much. And over that year, it sort of transitioned from property management to software because we had started using the software within that year. So prior to that, I had actually not been looking too much for expansion because we didn't have the software yet. And then once we got the software, and expansion opportunities had been coming all along previously as well, but I was more confident in grabbing them and actually going with it. So that's when I think within half a year, we tripled from 50 to 150 or something fairly quickly.
Half a year.
Yeah, it went fairly quickly because we took a couple of large blocks in a hotel, which had 61 units.
These are what, master leases, or you were managing for a hotel?
The hotel we were actually managing on sort of a profit share basis with someone who had taken out the master lease from the owner. The rest of them were all master leases, yeah. And then we also got some management deals on the side. And by this time, we were a relatively large team. I mean, we were probably like 30, 35 plus ground staff, cleaners, maintenance, and so on. So a lot of the work was being done by others. So I wasn't really focused on getting that. And then after that sabbatical year, I sort of took some time off. I was traveling a bit, and then from last sort of February, so we launched in March with Zeevou. So from February until the summer, so about 6 months, I was sort of working around the clock on Zeevou. And then COVID hit and we started feeling the effects. We tried to restructure away from master leases to management and so on, but the monthly income was looking fairly bleak and we were just about to cover costs, and I knew I had to do something before the winter hit. Otherwise, we'd start losing money in the winter again. I really didn't want to be back in the position. That's how I started purchasing the hotels and setting up the investment fund over the last couple of weeks.
Wow.
So I know it sounds like a lot of years, but it sort of it evaporates when you think about what happened.
So just to kind of recap, so
I sort of switched from property management company to software to
investment fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's not to say that I think the fund will not be a full-time endeavor. So I'm still probably more focused on Zeevou.
Got it. And why switch from and you've built up Keezark in it really well. I mean, it sounds like you've got this really good growth. What were you specifically doing to be able to triple in a 6-month time period? Was it some type of strategic partnerships, or was it you had some secret sauce? Like
I think it was just luck, to be honest. I think all our growth on the property management side has basically been luck. Being in the right place at the right time, speaking to the right people at the right time. Never really been aggressively trying to grow the business. And what sort of just happened, things have landed in our lap.
I mean, but like what type of people or what type of community? Because there's a lot of hosts that listen to the show that maybe they maybe they're struggling to find those right partners that can help them really add to their portfolio or grow their companies. What type of places should you be to be able to have those lucky opportunities?
It's a really tough question. People keep asking me, and I don't think I'm able to nail it down to 1, 2, or 3 things, because every opportunity was different. To start with, I was just speaking to friends or friends of friends about what I was doing, and a couple of them happened to just be in the process of purchasing, or had just purchased, a flat, or one had purchased a block of flats and was looking to do something with it. And that's how it started. And then later on, a lot of the growth when we went from 5-6 to 50-60 was through a large landlord that I'd come across by talking to a lady who I'd found who was renting out a flat, and in the end didn't end up being interested in working with us on that flat because she preferred to have a long-term tenant. But we sort of became friends, and she told me about someone who owned a whole block of flats next to where she lived. And so I tried to get in touch with that person, and it turned out that someone else that I'd met through another connection of a networking event also knew the guy and had just been offered a guest house that she didn't want to take. And so I said, well, introduce me to him. And then I took on the guest house, and I took on the block of flats next to this other lady's house. And that's how we sort of basically, and he had another block as well that was just coming to the end of a lease with sort of more traditional service apartment operator. So that's basically how we got to the 50-60. And then this hotel was, we got another block in another city of a sourcer on Facebook, which is actually the 1 out of 2 times that I paid someone for a lead. And that's actually been probably our best performing block of flats. It's sort of in a small town and there's no competition around, pretty much.
When you say a block of flats, so these are investors that literally will purchase like an entire,
this specific one was a landowner or 2 brothers who had a garage and then partnered up with a developer who put a whole housing estate on and gave them 8 flats and 4 or 5 houses in return, and we managed to get that block of 8 flats.
And these are investors that are looking for to furnish all of these properties, and then they just want you to manage them?
No, so this wasn't a master lease. So they just wanted to rent it all out, and we agreed to take on the whole building.
How much of your portfolio would you say is master lease versus management?
Well, about a year ago, we were mostly master lease with the minority management, and then last late March, before the UK actually locked down, I started calling everyone up and saying, I won't be able to get through this. If you want, I can give you the keys back, or we can move to management basis. So the majority of owners actually switched to management.
Really?
Yeah, because it was basically you couldn't really rent to anyone. It was very limited in who you could rent to. You couldn't do viewings. There were a lot of restrictions. So they knew that we were taking, and because we worked mostly with blocks, rather than losing us as a partner and have to deal with 10 individual people 6 months down the line and being empty for 6 months, I think they felt that there was the best option. And then as things recovered, we halved our management commission to 10% to enable that to happen. And then as lockdown lifted and so on over the summer, some of them actually made more money than they would have on a master lease anyway. So I think in the end it ended up okay on both sides, and we've stayed on those commission bases. Some of the landlords reduced the rents and we kept them as master leases on reduced rents, and we went back up and down and back up and down. So at the moment, I don't know off the top of my head, probably except for the things that we're purchasing through the fund, maybe like 50-50 managed and master lease.
So out of 400, around 200 of those were master lease and 200 management?
No, so the 400 include what we're purchasing through the investment fund, which is about 150 to 200.
Got it.
So from the other was about 100 or something.
Okay. So because of this investment fund, you've pretty rapidly scaled your portfolio.
Yeah, so the idea was to lose the income that we lost due to the pandemic by losing or by handing back a number of the lease units and by getting less in the management.
With the master leases, that when you decided to cut those off, did you just give the owners like the furniture and say like, hey, I'll manage this for you? Like how did that kind of happen?
Yeah, so in some of the cases, we had actually got master leases on places that were mostly furnished, and we just put in soft furnishings and TVs and kitchen appliances and so on, forks and knives and the small stuff. So we really didn't change anything. I mean, it's all been word of mouth agreements. We haven't gone and signed new contracts. And I think it was off the strength of the relationships that we'd built up over the years with the owners, that they trusted us in trying to find something that worked for both sides. So there was no formal handover of those things. They still owned what they owned, and we still owned what we owned. In other cases where we owned the whole furniture, in some cases we just took the furniture out. But we actually didn't end up giving back that much of the portfolio. We pulled out of London completely, where we had around 60 units in total. Yeah, and the rest we lost one other block in Cambridge, and that was it. The rest we managed to salvage somehow.
Hey, this is Julian, and I wanted to be able to give you our newest book, Airbnb Secrets Revealed: How to Build a Fortune on Airbnb Without Owning Property. In this book, we talk about the concepts of rental arbitrage investing as well as co-hosting and how you can build a business leveraging other people's properties. This book is perfect for the new short-term rental investor, and it's something that I wish that I had when I first started, as it would have saved me a lot of trouble and helped me to understand how to be able to leverage the power of short-term rental investing in your own real estate portfolio. If you'd like to get our newest book completely for free, go to shorttermsage.com/free book. Now, back to the show. So do you see management and master leases as a model that, because you've shifted focus more towards Zeevou and the technology, is there like more upside with the technology and the short-term rental space as opposed to the management and master leases? Or because you've been funding Zeevou through your portfolio, correct?
I mean, it's been a two-way relationship really, because Zeevou has helped us do a lot better on the management side or the lease side, whatever you want, in increasing the profits there. And I still feel that my efforts are better spent in trying to solve or improve Zeevou as a product, which has a direct impact on the existing portfolio that we have. So as well as making money off external clients, obviously one of the biggest benefits is that we're using it for ourselves, and we can continue automating more and increasing the profits on what we're managing. So yes, I could be spending time looking for more management units or more arbitrage units. The margins in management at the moment are very low. The markets are not really doing well. Arbitrage feels quite risky, and I always was aware of the risk in arbitrage, but unfortunately it was difficult to find enough people on management to be able to offset that risk by keeping a 50-50 split. So I think we're usually like 80-20 or something like that in favor of leases. And so that's how the ownership idea came about. I mean, I'd always had the idea, but that's why I really pushed to try and gather the funds from friends and family. And get it to work so that we could move into the ownership. And then that basically made me realize that it's a good time to be buying during the pandemic if you have liquidity. And I didn't have enough liquidity, and that's why the idea of the fund came up. So yeah.
One of the things that I want to go back to, because you right now with your investment fund, you're focused on like hotels, motels, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Correct. One of the things that you said previously was that you were actually partnering with hotels. What was that kind of partnership that you were doing? You were leasing them out, or you were managing them? How did that work?
So we leased a couple of small sort of guest houses with like 5 to 10 rooms. And then the larger hotel that we were looking after was on a profit share management basis. So we were offering all the staffing and all the expertise, and we were taking half the profit, basically.
Because there's not too many short-term rental operators out there that I know that are working with hotels, but it makes sense. Is that something that you see as kind of being like an untapped market, or are there a lot of hotels that are looking for, short-term rental managers to help them manage their hotels?
I'd say no. And I think it's probably fairly difficult to manage a hotel owner to hand over their property on a management basis. It just so happened that the person who was taking the lease on this hotel had no idea what we were doing. And we were looking at taking on an apart hotel in the same city as this hotel. And it was by chance that I met them on the visit through a Facebook post. They were asking to meet other operators in the area, and I figured that we had everything it took to run the hotel because we'd run the guest houses and lots of apartments before. So it just sort of naturally came out of that conversation. Of course, it might be worth approaching hotels, especially with the pandemic. I think what's making a lot of people sell at the moment is people who've been on the market for a long time. I have not yet seen people who are really affected by COVID, although there's some people who've shut since COVID, but they've just decided that they're too old basically to wait for COVID to end and then get back into it. So I think there could be some opportunities there with people who are basically fed up with the industry. I don't know how many of them will agree to leases or management, but I guess it's worth a go.
How different did you see it managing a hotel versus, managing leases, regular leases?
I guess the main difference is the expectations of the guests in terms of the check-in service that they receive, which results in higher staffing costs and lower profit margins. All the hotels that we have or are about to operate so far have been room only, so we haven't provided any food. That's one of the things where I feel that I'd like the software to be able to manage the food before I actually start operating to offer food, because I can imagine what sort of a headache it'll be trying to run 10 hotels remotely, and the reviews that we would get when things go wrong.
So you said that the profit margins are a lot slimmer for hotels as opposed to like a management or a master lease?
The profit margin per unit is probably quite a bit lower, but that's also because you're dealing with a room rental, not the whole apartment rental. What our plan is in terms of trying to improve the profits in the long run is to convert these into apart hotels by adding small kitchenettes into the rooms. And that was the plan, to buy one and to do that. And then while I was trying to buy the first one and thinking about this, I just happened to buy another two by chance, basically, which just happened. And then by the time that the third one was actually the one that we ended up buying first, and the other two were still with solicitors, that was a 30-bedroom hotel. And I looked at the cost it would take to turn those into studio flats. And it basically costs as much or more than buying one or two other small hotels. So I decided that for now, I'd like to employ the capital to purchase, down the line, spend the money on refurbing them, because I'm not sure how long you'll be able to get good deals on the purchases once the situation is improved.
How big of an opportunity is it right now for purchasing? Because you're looking specifically because you've got the short-term rental operator mindset, and you're moving into, I feel like an industry that's kind of been stagnant for quite a few years and doing the same thing over and over again. Do you see that there's a lot of opportunity for short-term rental operators to move into more of like this, apartment hotel, style?
I think, yeah, whoever can get the funding together will be very happy if they manage to ride out the next couple of years and manage to purchase something right now.
How big of a discount are you seeing these deals going for right now?
Up to 30-40%.
And these are properties that you with the intent of also rehabbing them and turning, adding in the kitchenettes and making them more like a hybrid hotel model.
I think in the long run that'll be the aim, yeah. But it's all moving fairly quickly. So I only started trying to buy the first one in September, and we're now at 7. So that's before even launching the fund and talking to investors properly. So it could be that things move relatively quickly over the next few weeks. So I can't really tell you.
Yeah, no, it's curious because we also started, our own investment fund as well.
Oh, cool.
And so it's I understand kind of what you're going through. You're definitely scaling very rapidly. It was one of the challenges with finding investors though is like because of the market. So how are you where are you finding these investors that are looking to invest into hospitality right now? Did you have like a large network before, or how are you coming about this?
No, so I've not actually started looking proactively for, say, investors that are not fairly close friends or family. So the ones that we've managed to purchase have all been very cheap for what they are. So we've managed to get sort of 15 to 20, 30,000 pounds a room. And yeah, in one of the cases, the largest property, actually, I've managed to borrow the money off the person selling it. So it's almost a fully vendor finance deal. Now to put down a very small down payment. So that means we've now managed to get the portfolio, the assets under management, to probably around 6 million or so. And as I say, I've not actually started looking proactively for investors on behalf of the fund because of regulatory issues not being in place yet. So there's been 2 people that or 3 potentially large investors who are talking about sort of 10-15 million range. And I don't know if they're bluffing or if they're actually going to go for it, but it would be nice. And I guess if we get one of those on board, we'll be busy for the next few months trying to grab what we can in the market.
Do you have any experience with like analyzing like hotels, or are you coming at this strictly from like a short-term rental operator mindset?
I guess we're coming at it from a short-term rental operator mindset in that we're only dealing with income from the rooms and not food and beverage. Having said that, in the long term, that's probably what we'll be aiming to get to. And also with COVID, you really can't make any money off food and beverages at the moment unless you're doing takeaways. So that's probably our advantage. And why we're seeing the opportunity and are able to make money where other people are losing money is because we're approaching it as an SDR operator rather than as a hotelier. Because, of course, if we were to try and hire staff to run places like a traditional hotel, then there wouldn't be enough money in it and we'd be making a loss.
So your idea with these hotels is to try to keep it, automated as much as possible, minimal staff, minimal guest interaction.
Yeah, so we've basically trying to do a sort of a funny mix so far of having some at the reception, but also doing self check-ins. So having key safes next to the doors, and only if someone's paying in cash. One of the places we've got a full-time receptionist, and another one we call on someone to go and collect the money and do the check-ins or do the viewings for people who are looking for sort of extended stays. And everything else except for the housekeeping and the maintenance gets done centrally. So we've got a fairly large team now. We've got a dedicated sales and marketing team. Which is also something that a normal hotel would not have. We've got the benefit of having people who are specializing in their fields. Someone who's focused on revenue management, someone who's focused on listing on various sites, trying to get as many direct bookings as we can. So making use of all the tech that's out there, which is, I think, part of the reason why a lot of hotels are struggling to compete with larger chains, is because they don't have the benefit of all of that.
So you feel that, coming at this as, with a background as a short-term rental operator, that you have a distinct advantage over traditional like hoteliers because, of the minimum. Like, what are some of the things that you're looking at this from?
Yeah, I think so. I think coming at it as a fairly large and relatively well-established operator has its benefits because although we didn't really have many hotels, we're essentially already a hotel chain in that we manage a lot of properties across multiple locations. And we've got the setup for that. And so just plugging another property into the system is fairly easy for us to do. I was talking to an agent yesterday who says it takes 3 years to get a hotel to profitability. Well, in our case, we make a profit from month one. So, it's a case of giving things a lick of paint and furnishing it, and we've done that within a week or two usually.
How can a hotelier it take 3 years to start making profit, yet in 1 month you're able to make profit?
We don't really do things the way a hotel would. So, for example, hotels usually are very inflexible on their nightly room rates. So they will stick up a high nightly room rate and they'll build up, accept a low occupancy until they get to the point where they can achieve a decent occupancy using that room rate. What we do is when we take a property on is we slash prices right down and try and grab as much market share as quickly as possible so we can reduce the risk of having the empty nights. For me, a penny in is better than a penny not in, and try and make some profit margin, however slim that may be. That also gives us the advantage of getting some people in on extended stays, and then in the second month, having fewer rooms to fill and making a better profit. So,
are you also looking at this from like an equity play? Like how much are you looking to increase the value of these hotels if you're knocking down walls and consolidating? Is it different? Like, do hotels, or when they're evaluating or trying to do, if you're trying to do like a refinance, or if someone's evaluating the hotel, are they looking at this like, oh, this is worth less because you're modifying it to this extent? Or if you wouldn't mind sharing on that.
I think in general, turning rooms into self-catering units would increase the value of a hotel. Obviously, you'd lose out on the income from the food and beverage section, but it depends on the ratio. So what we're going for is hotels with a large number of rooms, where a majority of the income would come from room rentals. And so by getting rid of the food and beverage communal areas and adding more units, it could tip the other way. I think it's also a bit of a risk reduction strategy in terms of being able to do extended stays more easily if you've got self-catering units, as opposed to not being able to do it on the rooms, which is why our niche as a whole as vacation rentals or service apartments has been able to withstand COVID better, right? So as a combination of those, I would not say that you'd necessarily detract from the value of the property. And moreover, by doing that, we would also probably, once we start doing the refurbs to a great degree, more than just cosmetics, be looking to modernize the bathrooms, which obviously also adds a lot to the value of the place. So in some cases, we're purchasing mainly based on a high ROI, predicted ROI, whereas in other cases, I've been more inclined to purchase properties because it's been at a heavy discount, and we can basically refinance it and get most of the invested capital out quickly, and then use that as deposit in another purchase. So it's a combination of the two. And I cannot give you a formula at the moment because we're still in experimentation phase to try and see what will work best and sort of grabbing whatever comes along that has, of course, we do our figures, but in the end, it's also a bit of a gut feeling as to what will work and whatnot.
So you're kind of looking at this as kind of like, this is the opportune moment right now to be looking at like apartments or these hotels that are at a discount and then turning them into like hotel apartments.
Yeah, I was always a bit upset that I was not old enough in 2008 to be purchasing properties. And I heard of a couple of people, who'd done very well purchasing back then. So it feels a bit like this is the closest we're going to get to a crash in the property market. And although the residential market is in the UK probably booming at the moment, not crashing, the hotel market has definitely dropped. And the other benefit of purchasing hotels and turning them into apart hotels as opposed to buying blocks of flats is that the price per room or per studio that you end up with, even after doing the refurb, is a lot lower than the purchase price of an existing apartment or a block of flats. But the other benefit is also that in terms of legislation, it's a very gray area still as to where you can and can't run short-term rentals. And I guess the one thing people can't argue is that you can run it in what used to be a hotel. So
Right. That's what I was going to ask. Was the with the regulations? Are you? Is this kind of safeguarding you from, by turning these apartments into apartment hotels, or these hotels into apartment hotels? Is this kind of protecting yourself, or are you finding it more challenging with the regulations, with what you're trying to do, converting it from, maybe a traditional hotel to almost kind of like a B&B almost?
Hmm. Yeah, except for it's just the B without the second B, right? So, I mean, a lot of the places we're taking on are really B&Bs. 20 to 30 rooms is not a large scale hotel. So, but the idea is even there within. So the way, at least the way it works in the UK, is that the planning permission would be C1 hotel used, and within that you have apart hotel. So an apart hotel really should be a C1, not a residential, which would be a C3. And most people who operate short-term rentals do so on a C3 basis. And that is because there's no legislation that really says that you must have a C1 to be able to rent a self-catering unit for a couple of nights at a time. And so that's a gray area, and it's something that I was always worried about as business was growing, that from one day to the next, the government could introduce a piece of legislation that basically meant we had to hand everything back and stop operating. Whereas with the hotels, yes, you might need, so a lot of the places we're taking on are actually listed buildings where you need consent, like historic buildings, that have certain features that you can't touch. And so it might not be that easy to convert them into apart hotels. And the good news is that there doesn't seem to be a need for us to be in a rush, because people are still renting rooms, albeit at low prices, which was something we were worried about when COVID hit, that the room rentals would really do awfully bad. But so long as things are en suite, we find that we are able to rent them out. And we're just trying to find a good development partner now to start looking at refurbing a couple of these. And it's also been a nice bonus to see that some of the really dilapidated hotels in town centers, there are indications that we might be able to get some financial support in form of grants or loans from local government to get those up and running again. So we'll see how things unfold.
How interesting! You've crossed over to the dark side, Naim. You're moving over to the hoteliers. When they're trying to shut us down, you're joining them.
Well, I think we shut them. I think we shut them down. So now's the time to go and reap the benefits of that.
How cool! What an interesting conversation. Well, if I want to wrap up this because we've been talking for a while, but if you could go back and start from scratch, what would you do differently?
I probably wouldn't choose this industry. I mean, I never really proactively chose to build a business in this industry. I was studying natural sciences and I wanted to go into nanotech. I probably would have gone into nanotech or biotech or something along those lines.
Okay, so you're digging your ditch even further here. I mean, you're getting more entrenched into the business. Why not just stick with the tech side, the Zeevou? Like, why grow your short-term rental portfolio?
I think the strength in Zeevou is the experience that we've gained in operating. And I think that the only way that we can keep at the forefront of the industry is by engaging with other users, but B, also having the in-house experience to be able to make decisions on the fine-tuning of how things should or shouldn't work, and being able to prioritize things as to try and help all the hosts who are using Zeevou to maximize their profits. That's one of the things. The other thing is that in the short term, it's a lot easier to make money off property than it is through software, especially in the current pandemic. We've been very lucky that we've grown month and month and month since we launched, and a lot of our competitors have actually seen up to 40-60% drop in their sales. But it's relatively difficult to get people to buy a premium product at the moment, and we're definitely not the cheapest in the market. And it just feels... Zeevou, yeah, we're fairly expensive. And that's because I believe we offer a very good product. And more importantly, we offer very close account management and high levels of support. And we're about to launch Zeevou Academy, which is going to be free for a couple of months. And it'll be sort of a group mentorship opportunity for people to engage and learn from the experience that we've gathered in operating properties. And we're looking to share that with anyone who is looking for some support to get through these times. The other side, as I was mentioning, yes, I'm trying to safeguard the property management company away, but really the more interesting thing is the asset acquisition strategy, given the current market crisis within hospitality. So I think that's what's attracting me more, rather than wanting to expand the property management business on its own. to doing that. And it just feels, if I'm going to be in this niche, it's good to diversify and not just be within one space. And at the same time, it's nice it makes it easier, for example, for the property management company, if we're also in a way owning it through the fund, or managing the ownership through the fund, in that we don't have owners who are nagging or being slow and fixing things when things break, right? Or a lot of things that you'll be aware of where there's a bit of friction between operators and owners, especially if you're on a lease and your profit margins are slim and they're expected to take some of the work on for the money that they're making, they're not. So it just feels like it'll be a lot easier if everything is in the same pocket and we can distribute those profits and build a sustainable long-term business ourselves.
How many is on your core team? You've got kind of like 3 different products going on at the same time now.
So how many people?
Yeah, like part of your executive team.
So the business is run independently, mostly staff-wise, except for the marketing, which we share between the brands. In total, there's around something like 45 staff who are working on Zeevou. And then on the property management company, we've got probably similar figure, I'd have said around 50 plus housekeeping staff or outsourced cleaning companies and maintenance staff. So I think we're getting close to the 100 mark in total, or maybe slightly above 100. Wow. And the investment fund, as I say, is still in the process of being set up. There's a couple of staff members from Keezark, from the property management company, who are helping with business development that I've sort of moved across. There's a few outside advisors that I'm starting to work with, but it's not a massive initiative at the moment. Yeah.
How old are you, Naim?
I'm 26.
Holy cannoli! you got a whole lot going on. Surprised your hair's not turning as gray as mine.
I'm told I've got a couple of gray hair. I don't know if you can see them. I don't know if it's true or not. Might be people trying to scare me off.
Awesome. Well, what's the best way if anybody wants to be able to connect Naim with you? How can they get in touch?
Probably Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well, and Twitter, although I don't really use Twitter that much. But okay. Wherever you message me, it'll come to me somehow.
Okay.
Or you can visit my website.
Your website. And of course, we'll include all the links down below in the description of this video. Naim, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. And until next time, Host Nation, keep on hosting.
Thank you for having me, and I hope it's been of some benefit to someone out there listening.
Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to hosts that have been featured in these episodes as well as the community, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation.